Howdy, all of you delicious people. Have you been dorked? I hope so. So, going into this movie, going into the Monster Squad, technically you could go out of your way to finally say that you've seen this movie via Amazon Prime right now. Definitely check it out. It's a really funny movie. I'm kind of questioning why exactly that they have this on Amazon Prime right now because it's not quite yet close to October, but I guess we're kind of gearing up for scary movies, I guess. But anyways, like this movie is probably going to be the closest that it's probably ever going to get to a universal mixing of monsters where it's just kind of like this is the only attempt that will really get a universal monsters like Avengers style movie where we have Dracula, werewolf, the mummy, Frankenstein, creature of the Black Lagoon, kind of, because he ends up being called Gillman in this movie, and basically anything under the sun. There was a ghost car in a part of this movie, which that doesn't mean technically there's a ghost in this film, but there's a ghost car. So close enough? No? Point taken away from Gryffindor? Okay. So, going into this review, I had a lot of fun with this movie. We really have this kind of really just monsters versus Goonies kind of approach. If people love Goonies, they might enjoy this film. Uh, Really, we just have a cluster of kids who are to know a lot more about monsters than supposedly anybody else does. And of course, we always get the adults that are just like, I don't know what this is, but I'm sure it's not anything supernatural. It has to be something realistic, or it can't just be the Booger Man, because it just can't be that. And when eventually it is actually the Booger Man, they just can't come up with a rational thing to try and take this thing down. Or reasonably, we have guys like Dell going at monsters with dynamite, because what the heck else could he do? Going into this movie also, like, it's kind of interesting because we end up finding out certain things. There's supposedly a lot of questions to be had of if the Wolfman actually has a dong, or whether or not you can have a different way to kill a Wolfman, or we also kind of have like just some interesting kind of debates going on within this movie. Here's also some interesting thing, or an interesting thing. Coincidentally, the werewolf who is to be in the Monster Squad is actually a werewolf in the movie Fright Night 2. The exact same character is to play a werewolf in Fright Night Part 2. Eventually, I'm going to go and try to review that today. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, I just realized that while watching that movie, I'm like, why does this guy look so familiar? I'm like, oh, I think he's been in Fright Night Part 2 before. So, yeah, so really that's to all really build up to their being. Like, we have this weird way about going about this story, because, like, oddly enough, we have, like, Van Helsing, who is to have this woman who is pure, let's just say, going and reading some scripture to try to suck all these monsters into this black hole of a thing. But reasonably, it doesn't quite get the job done, because all it really does is just start sucking in Van Helsing and his men. So eventually, 100 years later, we have, of course, Dracula, who's now to attempt to get this amulet of which that Van Helsing used to try, I guess, to suck all of the human race into this wormhole thing. But they have to get Van Helsing's book, which coincidentally is in the hands of the Monster Squad. So, really, that's just a tee up of the movie. Fun stuff here. Like, I really like how we have the Wolfman here. Like, just really, like, I love Wolfman movies. And, like, this character doesn't disappoint. Plus, also, we have to remember that the werewolf, when he's not a, because they actually like don't skip on that fact. They have to drug the werewolf when he becomes the normal man. And I was like, wow, that's actually a really intelligent thing. Like nobody has ever like thought about that before. Is like, what is to happen when the werewolf is not a werewolf? Well, just drug the werewolf when he is not a werewolf and he's a normal man. So that way you can just wait till the next time you can use him as the werewolf. It's kind of smart and like I really enjoyed it. Plus, also it unravels, let's just say, a mummy thing of what is to happen when you unravel a mummy. Like we get that answer as well. So kind of an interesting movie. I'm probably going to end up having to review this in a very roundabout way because that's bound to happen. So if you're looking into a perfect review of Monster Squad, it probably won't happen, but I'm going to have a lot of fun while reviewing it. So let's go out of our way to say that it is technically that time again to go in the spoiler territory because it is yet again spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time to do spoil this movie. So, very beginning of the film, we have Van Helsing, I believe, who is to be having a young woman who is pure. In other words, she hasn't been with anybody in the bed sheets, if you know what I mean. So Van Helsing is telling this woman to spout all this German words to eventually open this black hole where all of a sudden these skeletons are to come on out and try to be sucked into this black hole. But eventually what ends up happening is Van Helsing and some of his men end up getting sucked in the black hole anyways. So all of a sudden that leads us 100 years later to all of a sudden have there be a plane that is to held or that is to hold the Frankenstein monster, and because there's a certain number of artifacts that are to be delivered somewhere. Coincidentally, we have Dracula who is also arriving upon this plane, and he is to go and just kind of knock out this pilot, but then this pilot ends up pressing this lever to have this coffin of Frankenstein drop, and so Dracula ends up dropping as well because that's the one thing that he needs. So Frankenstein's monster is to drop into this water, which eventually later on will be arisen via the help of the Gill Man. So now we have all kinds of things going crazy, going wild in this town. So, eschew us going into some other things here. Eventually, we have like these kids just loving all these goofy horror films, and these kids are to draw monsters in class because if anything, science is really boring. Evidently, they go to the principal, and the principal's like, hey, science is really cool. Like, don't be drawing monsters in class. And they're only drawing these monsters because eventually they're going to go to their secret club and show all the monster drawings that they had done. Because, like, and plus also they just hate a lot of their classes. Their classes have, like, their classes are just disinteresting to them because there is nothing there that is to talk about a monster or demon or whatever. Like nothing comes up. So eventually these kids are to go home, and so eventually Sean is to ask his father Dell to eventually go and go to the theater and borrow $5 to go and see a movie. And so eventually Dell is talking to Sean about this movie. It's like, well, like, didn't they technically do this kind of movie before? Like, because Sean starts, like, describing the movie, and Dell is just like, well, like, so he just always just re-arisens back from the grave. Like, what is the point of going into this movie anymore when it's just like the same thing just keeps happening? It's like, well, because they do it in a different way. They kind of approach it into a different thing, and it's just like it's really fun. And Dell is just like, well, you know what? Like, me and your mother are going out, so if anything, like, you can't go out tonight because you're having to watch over your sister, but I'll take you to the movie another night. And Sean is just like, well, come on, I just want to see the movie. And Dell is like, well, not tonight. And so Sean is like, well, can I still borrow $5? Dell is like, okay, sure. So, uh, so eventually, what is to end up happening is Dell, who is supposed to go away with his wife on this night, all of a sudden ends up getting a call from his work because he's technically a detective, so he has to basically work all the time. So Dell is to be called away because supposedly there had been a mummy that had gone missing. So they end up going to this museum to try to figure out how exactly that this mummy had gone missing, and no one has a clue. Nobody understands. So they're just like, nah, I guess we just scrap this one up as just like a weird like crime of sorts. We'll probably never figure it out. So all of a sudden, also, while I guess Dell and his partner is to fill out paperwork, we also see a man who is desperately wanting to have this police force lock him up because he is telling them that he is a werewolf and he desperately wants them to lock him up. It's just some normal guy. And he's like, the full moon's gonna rise soon. I'm gonna become a werewolf. Like, please just arrest me. Like I'll do whatever crime it takes for you to arrest me. Just arrest me. And so eventually the guy ends up getting so aggressive that they end up just putting numerous bullets into him, and they carry him out via this ambulance. But what good does that really do? Because eventually this guy is to turn during ambulance into werewolf, attack the driver, and the werewolf is to just run off anyways. So it's just like, what a pointless endeavor that was. Just, yeah, just slug some bullets into him. What good does that really do? So eventually Frankenstein is, or Dracula is to eventually go towards this water where the Frankenstein monster is, and that is to eventually lead both the werewolf and or both the Wolfman and the mummy to arrive also, so we see what these characters look like. And so then also we see Gillman, or the quasi creature of the Black Lagoon, similar, because they can't actually call him that because probably rights or something. So, but they can call him They can call Count Dracula. They can call Wolfman. They can call Mummy. The Gillman, I guess, not so much. So Gillman is picking, like, gorilla pressing, or just like holding the Frankenstein's coffin and pushing it back onto the land. So they open the coffin up, and so bizarrely, Frankenstein, or what, I keep confusing Dracula with Frankenstein. Dracula goes and takes this wand and is to use it as a lightning rod, and is to connect these two devices into Frankenstein's metal parts of his body to then electrify him to awaken him. And so now everybody's at the party, basically. So eventually what is to happen with this movie is we are to have one kid, I believe, who is to be called Eugene, who is to eventually see a mummy in his closet. And so Eugene's father is to desperately ask his dad, like, hey, like, there's a monster, like, in my room. And so the father goes and does the, like, cliche-ish thing of just going in there and just going to this kid's room, like, okay, you monsters, get all out of here. Like, get out of my son's room. Come on. Like, did I solve that for you, son? And Eugene is like, well, but there's still a monster in my closet. So all of a sudden, Eugene's father is to like open the door, but conveniently like not actually look into the actual closet. And so Eugene is just looking at his son the whole time, and just saying, okay, monster that's in the closet, get out of there, like skedaddle. And so he's like, well, I guess I covered it, or I guess I took care of that. And so he closes the door of the closet, and then Eugene's dad is asking Eugene like if that solved everything, and it's just like, sure, dad, sure, he didn't do anything. So Eugene's dad walks away, and so the mummy just goes out of the window, and I guess that's technically to get rid of that thing. But yeah, so pushing on. So eventually Dell is to mention to his wife about what is all going on. That, like, he's mentioning all of his cases, that supposedly a mummy had gone missing, that a guy at his work had crazily been mentioning about, like, that he's a werewolf, like, all heck is breaking loose. And so all of a sudden we have Sean, who is also going and checking this name, and all of a sudden like starting to mix words around, and all of a sudden he gets to this combination of Dracula, and he's like, oh my god, like Dracula is also here, Dracula is also involved, what's going on here? So anything, we are to have Dracula, who is to eventually try to figure out where this amulet is. And eventually, while going through this one home, eventually he is to find out that it's through some wall. They were desperately trying to figure out where the heck that this was, and eventually they do find it, but eventually it doesn't technically get into the hands of these guys, because eventually the Monster Squad are to eventually get it at some point. But let's also get to the part where we get Rudy in here, because Rudy is going to be the guy who is to be able to basically make the weapons to kill a lot of the monsters, because he's older than a lot of the other ones. So we have a kid who is named Horace, who is to be bullied at school. So this is kind of early in the film, and he is to be bullied by a kid named EJ. What a goofy name, right? So Horace is to be bullied by this kid EJ, and they're to kind of give him wisecracks about how he's like a little bit overweight, which is just garbage thing to do. EJ is to just go and grab this Snicker bar away from Horace, drop it onto the ground, and press on it with his foot. And so all of a sudden, Rudy is to be part of here. I'm like, wonder where they got that name from. Like, I guess like Rudy could be a common name during that time period or whatever, but like, I don't know, like they had kind of goofy names for most of these people, with the exclusion of probably the main people that had to have cool names. So Rudy just appears out of nowhere and is to tell EJ that, oh, hey, like, it seems like you dropped a candy bar on the floor. And EJ is like, well, that's not my candy bar. And Rudy's like, that's not my problem. Like, I'm paraphrasing here heavily, but Rudy is to say, like, hey, like, if you go and you eat that candy bar, we're going to be fair and square, all right? So you go right in front of me and eat that candy bar. And so EJ picks it up, is like, it's like, dude, you just stepped in that, and everybody's like, oh, that's gross. No. Gross over here. Gross a man. He's eating foot burger or foot Snickers. That's kind of gross. So we had to see that. Like I think they should have showed us the whole scene where he's eating the whole thing and he's like, nah. He's crying the whole time. But anyways, so that forces us to say, hey, like Rudy is probably going to be the only one that is going to be able to defend any of these Monster Squad kids. So he should obviously be a member, right? He's the oldest one. Strategically, it makes a lot of sense. And plus, also, Rudy is to be the only kid out of this group who is to be consistently going and having binoculars or cameras trying to poke through uh, some house to go and consistently see Patrick's sister consistently unclothing for whatever reason. Like, I don't know what it is. Every time, like, these guys have this perfect thing to see just Patrick's sister just, like, taken off, whatever, till eventually, like, Frankenstein accidentally takes this photo of Patrick's sister, like, disrobing to where eventually they have some dirt on her, which they'll use later. So, so that leads us, or that takes us to go on and uh, now everyone has to be told that, hey, like, this is the Monster Squad if they weren't aware of it before, because Dracula's here, the werewolf is here, everything is here now. So eventually God, no, I can use this. Frankenstein is to get word via Dracula that Frankenstein needs to go and find uh, Sean and these kids and go and get the book from them, the Van Helsing book, which they don't technically do, but eventually the kids eventually go to where Dracula and them are at anyways, but eventually they still don't get the book. So it seems that Sean has supposedly one creepy neighbor that eventually they'll need the help to get. Because eventually Sean needs to figure out how to read the Van Helsing book, but supposedly it's in German. And so Patrick's sister is to have supposedly done some German, and they're like, oh, so we should have her, like, technically join with us and like be a part of our group then. And also we can oogle and ogle at her because we technically have seen numerous pictures of her, or we've technically numerous times seen her disrobing at this point, and like anyways, so like bizarrely we have to have like these oogle and ogle moments, which is great because anyways, pushing on. So Sean and the group are to eventually go to their neighbor, who they find out is like the nicest guy in the freaking neighborhood. He's freaking giving these kids pie, which hopefully isn't drugged, and but it isn't because they didn't fall asleep or like plop or die over. So like the nicest neighbor, weirdly. No offense to that guy, he didn't look like he's just this scary German guy, evidently in IMDb. What the is that? So they go on and they ask scary German guy, like, hey man, like, do you think that you can read this book? Can you translate it to us? And so this guy's like, sure, like, I have nothing better to do with my life. I'll go and translate every single piece of this. And hey, if you guys need a situation where you're going to need my help later to basically save the world, like, I'll be a part of that too. Like, I'll be a part of your monster squad and basically save the world, and I'm not going to get a lick of nothing afterwards. Like, I'm not going to get a nickel, dime, or anything after saving everyone's freaking life. But hey, I'll be in a movie, though. Huh? Huh? I'll be in a movie, so that's good enough, I guess. I'll have a credit to my IMDb forever. Anyways, so this guy is to translate this thing and help these kids out, and So it eventually seems that this scary German guy is to eventually tell us that he has some kind of connection uh, of some part of his past to eventually tell us that all of a sudden this guy has this tattooed of a number marking, which I'm wondering, and I hope it doesn't feel like I'm insensitive for trying to figure this out here. There's a bunch of numbered markings, and I've only seen that once before on Magneto in the X-Men franchise, the original X-Men franchise with Hugh Jackman and Patrick Stewart, and every freaking buddy else, James Marsden as the original X-Men, where the older Magneto had these tattoos, which was to lead him to be supposedly a Holocaust member, which I don't know. I could be inaccurate about that. Like that could have been any number of tattoo, but I was just thinking like I was trying to make that connection there, but I could be inaccurate about that. So so yeah, this guy really isn't scary at all, whatsoever until he said boo, and I was like, oh my god, that was a jump scare of this movie. So eventually, this is to all lead us to have these kids go into this scary, scary house. Eventually, once they are to get Frankenstein, who uh, Phoebe is to find bizarrely and like, hey, look, can I be part of your monster squad? Because there was no girls allowed. And like she was like, hey, like I deserve to be like on this monster squad because now I have Frankenstein. And all the kids are just kind of like, we have the one kid who's like hiding in the trash can. He has the lid on top of him. It's like, don't touch me. Everyone is hiding from Frankenstein. And like, dude, he's like freaking like 10 feet away. Like, what do you think he's gonna do? Do you think he's gonna have like lasers come out of his eyes? Like, and plus also, shouldn't you have been running the freaking away from this guy instead of just standing in one place trying to think that you're gonna be protected or like brace for impact for whatever Frankenstein is going to deliver? Which is what exactly? Because he's Frankenstein? If it was Dracula, I'd be like, one, how is Dracula up during the day? Because he would be smoke. But like, at least that would be a much more threatening thing. Like, if it was the Wolfman, I would also just been like, yeah, he can jump and run and all kinds of things really good. Well, not so much with the Wolfman. And plus, also, he can just scratch me, and then I will become Wolfman because that's always what happens in our lives. So, Wolfman. Anyways, so all of a sudden they end up finding out that Frankenstein is cool. They end up giving him some words at the time, like bogus or whatever goofy thing. And it seems like Frankenstein just becomes their friend and isn't after the book or like really just like has no plans whatsoever because he's freaking Frankenstein. Like Dracula, I guess, really didn't think that really all that well over. Like, but anyways, that just leads these kids to go into the spot where technically all the monsters are anyways, because eventually they are to eventually try and find this amulet, which of course they end up doing. So eventually when they go into this house, that is to be kind of like just kind of just crappy and just falling apart. Eventually, they are to meet the Wolfman, and so Horace is to kick the Wolfman in the junk, and so they end up running off. Because there was always this debate, I guess, with the group of if a Wolfman technically has twig and berries, if you know what I mean, has a dork, because like they want to try to rationale why the Wolfman had clothing for so long, and it's because technically he has a wing and he needs to like be like protected at all times. You would have thought the Wolfman would have worn a cup then, but I guess not. So maybe the dork is too big, and maybe it just would have like gotten like sensitive anyways. I don't know. So Horace is to kick the Wolfman in the junk. The Wolfman is to go down because he's a Wolfman and junk hurts. So chasing all around, and eventually they end up scrambling and getting the amulet. They end up running off, and now they're like, yeah, we got the amulet. Let's get the heck out of here. So eventually, what is to happen in a part of this movie is that the mummy is to get in the back of of course, Monster Squad's car. And so what they actually end up doing is they actually figure out a way to unravel the mummy's body, which I thought was like the most brilliant thing, because I'm like, man, what has to ever happen when a mummy is to get unraveled? He basically loses all of his he loses all of it. Like everything just drops. So uh and so Rudy is to have all this plan of getting all these weapons together to eventually go after Dracula, Mummy, and Werewolf and everything. And so eventually he goes to these wood chopping schools and stuff like that to bizarrely make silver bullets and to make giant stakes for vampires. We also get freaking Dracula's wives, because eventually Dracula is to get a snack, which is just these three random women, and they just become Dracula's wives. And then eventually Rudy just like freaking kills all of them. And like all of a sudden, like I was just expecting to get Rudy to get like handcuffed and be like sent away forever, because logically we have like police that appear right after that, and they're like, book him, Dano, like he killed women. What the heck? Like, he's going away forever. Like, you would have thought that would have been a thing, but no, I guess they bizarrely figured out that these things were monsters, so they were okay with it? Huh? Pushing on. So, but Rudy goes and, like, I think what he ends up doing is he, like, takes a part of the rope of the mummy and figures out a way, I think, with an arrow or something, because he went to this archery class and stole like one of their archery kits. And I think he ends up taking an arrow and shooting the arrow into one of these trees, which causes the mummy to unravel, and then all of a sudden the mummy is to fall off of this car because he basically is just literal bones left, so falls apart. So that's kind of an interesting way to take out the mummy. But eventually, maybe he'll come back again because maybe he'll put himself together. Pushing on. So, eventually, we are to have Dracula that is to make his way to Sean's home, and because weirdly enough, we have like Dell and his partner, who is to be Sapper or Sapper. I want to say Sapper. I could be wrong about that. Who are just kind of driving along, and bizarrely, like Dracula's car is to be weirdly enough this like ghost car coffin of a thing, or not coffin of a thing, hearse. That's what I was going with there, because it seems like there was a coffin to be had there. But anyways, pushing on. So Dracula makes it to Dell's house, and it's to tell Dell that he is going to come for his son. And so eventually the kids are to now have to forcibly figure out where there could be one place where they can eventually perform this procedure to use this amulet to try and it has to be in a very public place. So they decide to scramble and just head to this church because they figure like there's enough public people there, like if anything, a lot of monsters hate churches, so that's the perfect thing to do. So they scramble onto the church, and then they can't make it to the church. So they're just like, well, where the heck else are we going to go? And like, we can't just do this in a Burger King. I almost said Burger King, because I think traditionally when I was young, I used to say Burger King a lot. Um, they were going into this burger. They were almost going to go into a Burger King to do this whole thing, because what else could they do? So they just decided to do it in the town square. So eventually, the scary German guy is to eventually come in and to try and teach this girl who was to be Patrick's sister. She doesn't have a name. She's just called Patrick's sister. That's it. They end up also having to speaking of Patrick's sister, they had to blackmail her by telling her that they have photos of her, and that's how they got her to do this whole like amulet speaking stuff. But they also had to have her like say like whether or not that she was a virgin or not, and eventually when Patrick's sister is to mutter all these words with this amulet in this book to like think that everything is just gonna go away, while like Dracula's wives are coming in and Ruby's having to take them out. Gilman is to come in and Horace is to grab a shotgun and try to take him down, and the Wolfman is to appear and just like ransack through a bunch of cops. Ooh, there's this really cool spot uh, where uh, where the Desperate Man, who is to be the guy who eventually turns into Wolfman, the Desperate Man was to run to this one gas station to make this phone call before he was to change into Wolfman. And so this Desperate Man ends up calling Dell to mention that his kid is going to be killed. And so all of a sudden, while this guy is talking to Dell, he ends up all of a sudden changing into the Wolfman, and then he ends up like breaking through the phone booth and just like hauling his butt back to Dracula. And I was like, God, that is such a cool image. Like not only that like whole transformation of a thing, but God, that was so cool. That whole scene where like and it was also so smart where the opposite guy was trying to help out the main character, but eventually he kind of helps him out too late because eventually he becomes the werewolf, freaking bashes through the phone booth and makes his way back to Dracula. So the Wolfman is to try and attack all these police officers because there's nothing that they can do. They're firing all these bullets at this guy that does jack crap nothing. So Rudy is to grab one of the guns and to take all the bullets out and replace them with a silver bullet or a couple of silver bullets. So Rudy ends up just freaking firing away at this werewolf, and that changes the werewolf back, and he's like, "Oh, thank you. Like, I'm dead now. Great. Thank God that I don't have to do this anymore." So that basically just leads like only Dracula is really just the real threat here. And so Patrick's sister is to say this incantation, and so now like nothing is happening. It's like, wait a minute, like Patrick's sister, like did you ever actually, are you really, like did you ever get dorked, woman? Tell me. If you got dorked, we're effed. And so the girl confesses, like, well, there was this one time with this one guy. I'm like, yeah, get away. we are gonna just put those pictures and put them in the freaking like on the school everywhere, like in everyone's locker. Everyone's gonna get freaking no. We're not gonna do that. That's a horrible thing. But, like, good God, woman. You couldn't have told us the truth, because life and death is literally depending on it. And you're like, oh no, I'm just going to lie. I'm just going to say that was, but I wasn't really. Give me the bird, woman. No offense to the actress. But come on, really? Could have been honest right away. Whatever. So they end up going with the youngest kid that they can possibly find, uh, which is of course Phoebe or Phoebe, whatever this girl's name is, the youngest, like basically Sean's sister, and taking her and just saying like, well, obviously she hasn't been dorked. You would have thought any number of these other kids would have probably not been dorked either, but I guess not, because they have to go throughout the entire town and try to ask freaking Rudy, hey, do you know anybody that hasn't gotten dorked yet? Because, like, and he does a spit take in this movie. Uh, so, like, I'm trying to cover all my bases in a roundabout way, but we're getting there. So now, like, this scary German guy is to now have to help this girl say all these words, say all this incantation, and try to help her read the thing. So he helps her try to read the thing, but then also he ends up just telling her, like, again what the words all mean. So what difference does any of this make? So the girl is holding this amulet, and eventually she tries to say the words, and eventually we just have Dracula that picks the girls up, or that picks the girl up by basically like face, chin, something in that frame of body. And Dracula's like, give me that amulet, you bit. There's this one spot that I forgot about, the whole dynamite thing. We'll have to get there in a second. Let me also reset here for a second also. Alright, so let's put a pin in that moment. Let's go back to the dynamite situation. So Del is to have a gun on him, and he's to be in town square. Dracula's to make his way. Wolfman is still alive, and like I think that's the only thing that we really need to have our bases cover. So this is an early part of the film where Wolfman is still alive, so I can cover that scene. So Dracula is to be in the town square, and so Del, who is to try to protect his son, is to put bullets into Dracula. Dracula is to turn into a bat because he does that in the very beginning of this film, and like he does this from time to time to transform into a bat. Like that's how he drops after the Frankenstein monster drops. He transforms into a bat and then flies down because all that he wanted was a Frankenstein's monster anyways. So Dracula turns into a bat and is now in this building, and so Del is to have this stick of dynamite to go and like, hey, this is probably going to take you out, right? So all of a sudden we have Wolfman, who is to be behind Del, grabs Del, and all of a sudden Del, because he like is just kind of improvising here, goes and takes a stick of dynamite, puts it in the Wolfman's pants, and like shoves him out this window, and the Wolfman is to just freaking explode into being a number of pieces. And so that kind of gives the conclusion if there is only 1 to 2 ways to kill a werewolf, and we solve that here. Because supposedly, I guess they were thinking if you blow a Wolfman up, he'll not come back to life. Well, we'd be wrong, because the Wolfman bizarrely just starts to, like, have his body just reform back together, I would naturally assume. Or maybe there's some healing factor of this werewolf or some weird bizarre thing. But it seems like his fingers were moving, it seems like his toes were moving, so I'm assuming, like, all this just reconnects to the werewolf body bizarrely. I've never seen that in any other werewolf movie in my life, but maybe there is some kind of healing factor of sorts when it comes to werewolves that I'm not aware of. Don't know. So Rudy is to finally mention, yeah, I guess there is only one way to kill a werewolf. Here's also a way to kill everything. Chop the head off. Use a silver something, chop head off. I don't quite always get where it seems that there has to be a specific way to kill things. I'm like, so, like, if you were to probably just say it's like, well, no, like, you can't go and kill a werewolf that way. Well, chop the head off and then just go and just repetitiously like stab whatever sword axe thing that you're using, hopefully it's silver, to just stab into this werewolf, and job is done. Because in all actuality, that would be as an equivalent of having silver bullets go inside a person's bate. Is no one else thinking of that? No. Why does it always have to be a silver bullet? Why can't it be the equivalent of a silver bullet? Like a silver sword, or like, you would think, like, how many werewolf movies has somebody been stabbed with something and died because they were a werewolf? Like, they've had some flimsy crap that has killed a werewolf. Like, I think a pen probably killed a werewolf in one thing somewhere at some point in time that was silver enough. Pen is mightier than the sword, I guess. So, but anyways, so Dracula, still alive, going and grabbing girl, it's like, give him my amulet, give it to me, I want a piece of that juicy amulet. So, but really just by that time, the black hole has started. Everybody's to try to hold on to dear life while things are starting to get sucked into this black hole of things. So all of a sudden, Dracula is to fall upon this black hole because Van Helsing is to grab Dracula and to kind of pull him back. And so Van Helsing is kind of giving like the thumbs up or the whatever to the one kid who is Sean. And Sean's like, hey, Van Helsing, yeah. Mad props, buddy. Mad props. Or whatever they say during that time period of movie. So, like, we're kind of seeing all kinds of random just stuff being sucked in there, like a car or some goofy thing. But sadly enough, we had Frankenstein's monster who ends up also getting sucked in there. I'm like, why isn't the mummy getting sucked in there, the Wolfman getting sucked in there? Like, any of the other monsters, like, I don't care if they're already dead. Like, let's just guarantee their deaths by having them all get sucked through in there to guarantee they're never coming back. But that's just my thought process here. So, Frankenstein's monster is to just get, like, he's holding on for dear life. We have the one girl who's trying to hold on to his, like, one of or two of his fingers. And so Frankenstein is like, bogus! This is bogus! No. Is to go in there. The girl, I think, chucks him like a play toy thing for him to kind of play with during his other stint of time in the black hole world. So I'm assuming probably Van Helsing is probably going to be dusting all the rest of those monsters in the other world to kind of complete this whole movie. So all of a sudden, we bizarrely, as I'm kind of coming to the close here, we eventually have the military that ends up coming in way too freaking late because of obvious reasons, because why would they? The military is coming in here, there's a guy with a huge cigar who's like, where's all the monsters? Like, I heard there was monsters amok. And so, like, who knows anything here? And so the kids are just like, oh, hey, like, we know what's going on. And the military force is like, well, okay, how is it that you know all this? And so all of a sudden the kid, like, gives the guy the card and says, Monster Squad, huh? So where's the information? And just, like, it's like, hey, Monster Squad, but tell me the story, kid. Anyways, so that's how this just kind of diffuses, and that's how this movie just finishes out. It doesn't feel like there's going to be a sequel here. They didn't gear that up for that. This was just a movie that was fun. But yeah, so hopefully I got most of this. I'm probably gonna eventually realize that there was a big chunk of this that I probably forgot. That's always bound to happen. Every once in a while, there'll be a day where I just want to go back to something and just be like, oh no, I forgot this one scene. People may not have felt that I was specific enough in this review, and I can understand that too, but also it really just like who knows if this thing is to eventually be this thing called successful. Because there are some times where I put something through, nothing happens, and then there's also times where just miraculous things happen, like one in a million kind of things where I'm like, oh my god, wow, this actually did well. Great. Thank goodness. So hopefully this might be one of those, but at the end of the day, I could just say that I had fun watching this, and I think that's the end goal. I had fun watching this movie. Hopefully you had fun doing whatever with this review. So I'm going to say goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.